created the radios that went into our cars. Then they created the two-way radios that every policeman and fire person had. Then they created two-way radios that we could use in our businesses. They are so good at this that they invent the cell phone business as we know it today. We call it the cell phone business because of cell towers. And they had enough oomph behind this project. They not only created the handsets, they created the towers. They got the bandwidth. They went to the communities and the states and the federal government, and they got permission to create this entire ecosystem of phones. And they kept making better and better phones until something happened. A little company out of Toronto, Canada, came up with the idea of adding to the phone other capability, like email. And if you put their phones in place, you could do email, and you could check the weather, and you could do a few other things with that phone. And by the way, you're now connected into the digital world, and so it's a little bit safer if you do it our way. And all of a sudden, you went from using a Motorola Razr to a Crackberry. Right? Remember those days? Couldn't live without your Crackberry. Had to have it in your hands. This is what happened. And that's what we started to realize, those of us who were studying strategy. We had spent all this time trying to help people understand their core and their focus, to look internally, to build their strategy from the inside out, to say, this is my greatest strength, how do I leverage my greatest strength? And the problem with that is as you leverage your greatest strength, you become very rigid. You're not adaptable. Some of the great speakers of the time, people like Jim Collins, came along and said, focus on your hedgehog concept. Put everybody on the bus. If they're not on the bus, throw them off the bus. We have to focus on doing what we know how to do. And they created companies that were completely unadaptable in a changing time. So what we started to realize from these two issues, growth must happen all the time, and change comes along with these big adjustments in it, was that by far and away the field of strategy had been misdirected internally and backward oriented. Figure out what you did well and do more of it. You'll never go wrong by doing more of what you always did. We realized that was simply wrong. And by 2005, we have a dramatic change in the entire field of strategy. And we realize that now we have to be much more externally focused. We have to look at the world around us and then develop the strategy. It doesn't come from within. It doesn't come from our background. It doesn't come from our natural resources. It comes from understanding the market. Because you can be the world's greatest horseshoer, and who cares? Right? If you're not in step with today, if you're not in step with the trends, unfortunately, you're on that right-hand side of that curve. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Everybody give them a round of applause. Thank you. Sir Paige? Thank you. Jim? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Naomi? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I got the right one.
Okay. All right, so how we think about change is mostly wrong. Now this turns out to be fundamentally, extraordinarily important in the field of education. Because throughout the business history, remember, we've only been teaching business for 100 years. You know, Wharton created the funding for the program to start business education around 1900 at the Wharton Business in Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania. That's why they named their business school after him. And then it was Mr. Baker that funded the first college of education, which was at Harvard. And that was not until 1905. And we really didn't have any discipline to the field until 1915. So we've only been studying business for 100 years. And unfortunately, looking back on it, we can say that an awful lot of stuff, we kind of made it up looking around, hoping that things were really the way we observed them. We were talking about observations and working with observations. We're trying to move beyond that now. We're trying to move beyond into some data that kind of give us some real facts. And one of the beautiful things you look for in the social sciences, which if anybody tells you different, business is a social science, was something that ties to the real world. Punctuated equilibriums tie to the real world. You all saw a punctuated equilibrium today. Yesterday I came to Wisconsin and the streets were wet. This morning, they were ice. That's a punctuated equilibrium. We went from a liquid to a solid, okay? Now the math's entirely different. Remember the Challenger? It blew up because the math on the O-rings was based on water. When it got below freezing that morning, it turned to ice and the O-rings no longer held. right? A change. A change that might look minor, but it's a punctuated equilibrium. It moves from one phase to another phase. And if you move from one phase to another phase, the world now is entirely different. And the assumptions behind your business have to be entirely changed as well. So, you know, the dinosaurs ruled the earth for 800,000 years. What happened? A giant meteor hits the Yucatan Peninsula. Giant ball of steam and dirt goes up in the air. That turns the world cold. It blocks all the light. Without any light, there aren't any plants to grow. Most of the dinosaurs are herbivores. Without any plants, there's no food. Without any sunlight, it gets cold, they have no hair. Within a decade, they're all gone. They're all gone. Now, clear to this is to understand, they had nothing to do with their own demise. They declined because they were a rigid animal that was unable to adapt to a significant change in their environment. And as such, they all died, and those little tiny mammals came along and managed to populate the rest of the world. Okay? We had a significant change. Let's take this back to something more practical. How many of you have a VHS tape at home? I give you permission to throw them away. You probably haven't even looked at a DVD or a Blu-ray disc in the last 2 years, to be honest with you. It took the industry 35 years to build that whole ecosystem of the video recorders, the videotapes, the video distribution centers, the putting the tapes out, the discs. That took 35 years to get us conditioned to renting and buying those tapes. When streaming came along, that whole business model died in 16 months. Sony started losing money and lost money every quarter for 6 consecutive years. They were fully invested, owned, and had control of a lot of the one on the left. But all it took was that shift in one technology, the advent of high-speed bandwidth, which allowed streaming, and boom, all of a sudden you're in a new world. And that's why it's crucial for us as economic development people to realize you have to put your money on the right side. Because when the left side becomes obsolete, you cannot save it. There are no examples, none, of somebody saving a business once that punctuated equilibrium occurs. So as people are coming to you and asking for money or looking to recruit or looking to move into a business, it's your job to not only try to convince them that it's a good place to be, but then talk to yourself and your peers and your community about, is this the kind of company we want? Are we here because they're going to move our community forward? Or are they asking us to try to help them protect and defend an obsolete and dying business? Because the answer to that is crucial. There's one company that's made more money in the PC industry than all other PC-oriented companies combined. One. Microsoft. Microsoft built a near monopoly on Windows and Office. They made 120% of the reported profits off those two products. I say 120% because they lost money at everything else, including Xbox and all those games. They still lose money at that, right? So here you have a company that was a monopoly that just sort of printed money, right? But what happened? We see the advent of mobile. That takes us to smartphones, it takes us to tablets, it takes us into smart devices and smart speakers, a whole new world, right? How does this company play in the new world? Look beyond brand. Look beyond size. Don't be fooled when somebody comes knocking on your door. Maybe they were great once, but does it mean they're going to be great in the future? There's a lot of reasons to question Microsoft's viability. They're on the left side of a punctuated equilibrium. The only thing they've said they've got is a competitor to compete in the cloud services business. And we all know who's number one there, right? Will they be able to sustain? Will they be able to make it? I don't know. But are you asking yourselves those questions when a company like Microsoft comes calling? Or do you just roll out the red carpet because, well, it's a big brand name company that's got some resources and we all know who they are? You got to start thinking today. You really do. Because things don't last the way they used to last. Sears. A few years ago, 2011, Ed Lampert, the chairman of Sears, who took over the company when we put Kmart and Sears together, said he was going to move the headquarters out of Illinois. Now, I want to be clear. He didn't say where he was going to move it. He just threatened to move it. Well, Hoffman Estates, the local community, could not act fast enough to give him a series of tax breaks. The state of Illinois could not act fast enough to give him a series of tax breaks. By 2011, one thing was clear. The Sears business model was dead. We had discounters like Target and Walmart who were hashing it out for the balance of what was really going to be the brick and mortar trade. The high-end stores like Macy's were already getting into a whole lot of trouble. They didn't look like they were going to make it much further. These guys, they had nothing. They had no game left at all. Yet, the economic developers couldn't move quick enough to give them what they want. 2017, they've dropped below the jobs threshold to keep those. But state doesn't really know how to shut it off. They made a commitment, now they're stuck with it. They haven't shut that off yet, even though in June they went below the commitments. How does Sears react? If you saw this morning's newspaper, they said they're going to lay off 220 more people in Hoffman Estates. What happened was the community moved to protect a series of jobs in a company that's going bankrupt. Had they not done that, one of two things would have happened. Either a greater fool would have stepped up and put up the money so that Sears could move. I doubt that, and I doubt Sears had the money to move even if they'd been promised, because they were in such deep financial trouble. So a little economic analysis might have said, this is a bluff, and we should call their bluff. But now they're stuck with it. They're stuck with it. What's bad about that? What would have happened if that money had gone to Google to try to recruit Amazon, not today when it's looking for a second headquarters, but in 2011? What if they'd approached them then and said, hey, we got a pocket of money. We thought about giving it to Sears. We'd rather give it to you. Then what would the competition look like in 2017? So you got to be forethoughtful today if you're in economic development. You can't just wait for the deal to come to you. Sometimes you need to take the deal to them because that's going to send you the direction you want to go. And the first step to this is understand the value proposition. Encyclopedias don't exist anymore. Nobody wants Encyclopedia Britannica. Well, why not? It's not because you don't want all the information at your fingertips. Think about it. I used to ask people a question. I was perfectly happy if I got the answer tomorrow, right? Today, you